Coming up on This Week in Radio Tech, site monitoring. That doesn't sound very exciting until you realize what it can cost you not to monitor your site and not to monitor trends. And the good news is today's technology makes it a lot easier to do that and very convenient to see what's going on at your sites over time so you can spot problems before they're problems. Adam Robinson's our guest. He's coming up next on TWiRT.
This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Broadcasters General Store with outstanding service, savings, and support. Online at bgs.cc. By Broadcast Bionics with the Bionics Studio, including talk show control, social media, and visual radio. Broadcast Bionics brings exceptional audience engagement to radio and TV. By Air, featuring Playout One radio automation software, comprehensive streaming solutions, website content management, and social media tools for maximum listener engagement on the web at AIIR.com. By Angry Audio. Audio problems disappear when you get angry at angryaudio.com. And by MaxxKonnect Wireless, prioritized high-speed internet service designed for transmitter sites and remote broadcasts.
Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech, the show where we talk about everything from the microphone to that light bulb at the top of the tower. Hey, I'm Kirk Harnack. So glad that you've joined us today. We are doing the show live here on, what is today? The 13th, November the 13th and of 2025. It is a cloudy day here in Nashville, Tennessee. Not as cold as it was. You know, we had that cold bomb come down over a good part of the United States, and we certainly got that with a couple of 22-degree mornings here in Nashville. But it's warmed up now. It's turned out to be kind of a nice day, except for the clouds. So that's where I am. I'm in the Telos Alliance studio here in Nashville, Tennessee, and we have a guest with us. Our guest is a really interesting person. Met this guest a few times before and saw him most recently at the WABI convention, the Western Association of Broadcast Engineers in Canada, in Calgary, Canada. And here he is to talk to us about some really good engineering topics. And that is Adam Robinson. Adam, hey, welcome in. Good to see you.
Hey, Kirk, thanks for having me. I'm literally honored to be here and be in your presence on your wonderful podcast. So thank you for having me.
Oh, no, sir. You honor us by being here. You really do. I got to learn a fair amount about you at the WABI convention. You and I really hadn't talked much. We talked at what, CCBE in Canada.
Yeah, we've talked a few times over the years, but I think we really kind of got to know each other on the floor there while we were hanging out in the Pippin technical booth. So
we've got a few things to talk about on this show. One of the things we're going to learn about from you is about site monitoring, and typically we're talking about transmitter sites, and how that has changed and how the emphasis on that has changed, and how why it's really important to do this. And there are some ways to do it now that are, less expensive than sending human beings there on a regular basis, and really less expensive than not sending human beings there, because that can cause real troubles. We'll have stories about that, and we'll talk about the technology. But first, Adam, why don't you give us a little indication as to your involvement in the broadcast industry, so we can know you've got some real engineering chops as we listen to your advice in the next hour.
Oh, so this is the part where I lie about my resume?
Exactly. Well, I've got the lies in writing right here.
Well, I'll try to stick to the script. I don't know what to tell you.
Let's see if your testimony matches this.
First off, I want to apologize to all of our American friends for the weather last week. We try to keep it north of the border, but every now and again it slips south. So yeah. While for you it was a 22-degree morning. For us, it was a very early, wet, heavy snowfall that absolutely screwed up traffic and the city itself here in Toronto, Canada, for a good couple of days. We don't normally get snow like that until later in the year, but this week, we saw some pretty significant snowfall. So it was a surprise for everybody. So, who am I? I'm a guy who likes broadcast. I started my career, I hate to admit, actually more than 30 years ago at this point. Got into radio because I wanted to be on the air. Spent 10 years on the air in and around the Toronto market here, mostly doing news. News director for a couple of regional newsrooms, and then anchored news for a couple of big morning shows. But I always had my hands in the technical side of things. even, as young as 8, 9 years old, I had a soldering iron in my hand and was, tearing things apart, not knowing how to put them back together. There is a long like of household appliances of my parents that had to be replaced because I decided to
it sounds like you could have been my younger brother. I had the same thing at my house. Soldered stuff that didn't need to be soldered, and always had leftover parts.
I learned the difference between AC and DC the hard way. Things of that nature. So yeah, so technical stuff has kind of always been in my wheelhouse, and as my career advanced, thanks to IT, broadcast automation, the convergence of analog and digital technologies, I really kind of found a home in doing integration between the two worlds, which then led to a very long stretch at the Evanoff Radio Group, or Evanoff Communications as it's known now in Canada, where I took on the role of Director of Engineering and IT, and we grew from a 3-station cluster in Toronto to 19 stations across the eastern half of the country. And I mean, over that span of time, and given the amount of work that we were doing, there are so many things that I saw and learned the hard way, that I have what I consider to be quite a few stories that I'm happy to tell. After that, my lifelong friend and colleague Ron Paley offered me a position to come work at his company, Ron Paley Broadcast, as well as DJB Software, where I was for the past 7 years. And most recently, I've taken on the role of Director of Sales, Marketing, and Business Development for MaxxKonnect and Helix Technologies.
This is really cool because people who have a skill set where they understand on-air operations, you have a voice for radio. You've been on the radio for years. You understand news, music flow, programming, program direction, probably music selection as well. And then you also have this engineering experience. Yeah, exactly. You've got engineering experience, including building studios, overseeing lots of studios with Evanoff. And then you also have the human interaction experience, which leads you into the sales arena, where you can show people how something works and help them decide, is this right for you or not? And that's a great skill set to have. We're going to put those to use in the next hour as we talk about site monitoring with Adam Robinson. We're going to get right to that in just a minute. We're going to take our first quick break here. Our show is brought to you in part by Air, AIIR, air.com, and they're making an incredible offer if you are streaming, maybe with another company, or maybe you're not streaming yet. Air.com has a really good deal. Let's see what we have to say about it.
Hey, it's Kirk Harnack, and I'm here with Ricky Lee, the CEO of Air. Ricky, you guys make a fantastic automation system, but streaming is a really big deal. Tell me about streaming with Air.
It really is. We've got a beautiful streaming platform with an incredible dashboard with fantastic analytics. And you can buy it for just $20 a month. All you can eat. No limits on bandwidth or bit rates. And you can also record shows as well. So if you like to deliver on-demand content for $20 a month, you can stream and deliver that on-demand content to an RSS feed that can feed your radio player, your mobile apps, or a podcast that people can download and enjoy.
Now, $20 a month, that must be for just some slow MP3, right?
No, MP3, AAC, and we also now support HLS, which is big in the industry right now.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. How do I start to explore or find out more about streaming through Air?
You go to air.com, AIIR.com/streaming, and from there, with a credit card, you can sign up and get started.
Great deal from air.com for streaming. And they also make the Playout One automation system. That's what I use across 21 radio stations, and we love it. Their tech support is great. Once in a while you have a little burble, little problem, and they are right in there to help solve that problem. Really appreciate air.com for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack here in the Nashville Telos Alliance studio, as you can see behind me. Yes, all bought and paid for. And my guest today is Adam Robinson. Adam is now with MaxxKonnect and Helix Technologies, although I always call them MaxxKonnect, even though there's other companies involved. Adam, okay, I think we ought to jump right into this topic for our discussion here, and that is site monitoring. And you mentioned in the run up to when we first got started with the show, that you were in charge or have been in charge of engineering and IT. And we see those two words, those two ideas, those what can be separate vocations and typically is engineering and IT together. And that means that you look at a lot of challenges and their solutions from an IT perspective. You want to expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, going back, almost 25 years, we started to see the convergence of engineering and IT. It was no longer two separate streams where there was, audio and transmission, and then there was, some computer stuff lying around. The computer stuff started to take the front path, and between audio over IP networks, and just monitoring. As soon as internet connections started to become the norm, high-speed internet came along, cellular internet came along. We were able to see and do much more at remote sites than we ever could. Started replacing copper lines and 950 band or 450 band STL with IP codecs. Remotes stopped using RPUs and started using codecs for those as well. Cell phones. The technology that revolutionized the world also revolutionized broadcast. And my career, I was fortunate enough to be kind of on the leading edge of that, simply by just being good with computers and understanding the power of IT and the power of what we could do, through the internet and through closed circuit networking, among a bunch of different sites.
Wow, you said something there that I am writing down right now. The technology that revolutionized the world also revolutionized broadcasting. That is so true, because that's how we connect things together. Sure, there's little final endpoints, maybe going from a microphone into a preamp, or going from an amplifier into a speaker, or an analog output to an amplified speaker. But man, that is just so true. And of course, this IT, this technology, computer technology, started to really get into broadcast in the early 1990s and mid and late 1990s, as people started playing all of their music and their commercials from computers. And we all have gotten pretty accustomed to that, right? I mean, and you were in that business with I'm sorry, Ron Paley, right?
DJB, with Paley and DJB, yeah. And that's where my relationship with Ron began, was with his MediaTouch offerings. He brought a MediaTouch system in a box to my college in the early 90s, and we set it up. A colleague of mine and I set up the system, without much more than a very rudimentary manual and a bit of elbow grease. And as a result, we learned the value, again, of having automation and starting to see the changes and trends. First radio station I ever volunteered at, the first station I ever worked at, it was carts. Everything was on cart. Occasionally, occasionally we pulled out a CD if it was a new spin, or a record if it was an old spin, and then reel-to-reel machines for all the recorded stuff. Within 2 years of that experience, everything started moving digital. And the 90s were an incredible period of convergence and an incredible period of change for this industry, where we started abandoning cart machines for automation, where we started abandoning reel-to-reel machines for digital audio workstations. That was a great time to enter the business, because not only did I get a taste for the analog, I also got to experience the digital, sort of at the cutting edge of that. So, and being able to, there's a couple of moments in my career that I can really sort of put my finger on, this is the future, this is cool stuff. First time I ever saw audio over IP.
Oh, yeah.
And saw that no longer do we need to have a physical wire, a physical pair of wire for every signal. Now it all just goes into these magic boxes and is turned into a digital stream and can be sent anywhere. That was huge. And the first the first transmitter with a GUI. That blew my mind as well, where it was just, okay, so no longer do we have to try and, pull information out of this unit just using bits and bytes and, analog contact closures. Now we can actually see what's going on and have it graphed in front of us and have it remote accessible. So, those two touch points, which changed the industry, are now crucial to the next step forwards, I guess, especially when it comes to remote monitoring. If the pandemic taught us anything, it's that people really like working at home. If it taught us anything, it's that we can do so much more when we rely on the technology as opposed to being afraid of the technology and not really deploying it. So we're kind of, I don't know where to put it, in the grand scheme of things. History will tell, but I feel like we're on the precipice of like 3.0 for broadcast technology.
Yeah.
If 1.0 was the early automation systems and 2.0 was when everything became connected through the web, now we're on the verge of 3.0, where we're actually going to start using more automation and more AI and more monitoring and more data gathering to have fewer people do more work.
This is really, really interesting. And I know on this show, I've talked many times. I've sung the praises of the fact that remote access into important systems, and even at a very detailed level, allows me to pretty much be the engineer for 21 radio stations. If somebody's not happy with their microphone, or, hey, actually yesterday we had an instance of Adobe Audition decide to get stupid on us, and they asked me, can I fix it? And remotely, first of all, I had to Google, actually I chat GPT'd, if that's can be a substitute for Google, the error code that was being thrown up. And then I remembered, oh yeah, we've had to do this before at another station. And I went and I backed up a whole directory in the app data section of a Windows machine. And then I deleted that directory and then restarted Adobe Audition, and it rebuilt the directory, and everything was cool, and all the settings were there, and it was just wonderful. And the fact that we can do that remotely, and I realize that's a computer, but you can do the same things with mic processing or routing this and that. We had an automation machine fail. It wasn't Playout One's fault; it was the machine's fault, and we happened to have a backup automation machine. So my friends at Playout One, they put the log into that backup machine, got it on the air. I had to make one route change, and I already had a button for it. So I went to the engineering utility PC. This is in Hawaii. I'm doing that. Yeah, I'm doing this at literally 5 o'clock.
No, Kirk. See, that's where you went wrong. If it's in Hawaii,
I should have gone. Yeah,
hey guys, I can't help it. I gotta go. Like it's broken. I have to go fix it.
So I hear you on that one. But we put the backup on the air, made the routing change, and then a few hours later we had the errant computer got fixed. It took a real person to do a few things on in front of it, and then back on the air. And you can do all that now remotely. So our topic's is site monitoring. Let's give a little tease into that, and then we're going to take our next break. So site monitoring. Now, there was a time, I want to say back in the 90s, when there was a company that would offer to put a small satellite dish at your transmitter site and give you some kind of monitoring. That was before the internet, really, at least before the internet was widely available.
Yeah, it was peer to peer. I mean, if you go back and have a look at the old Mosley remote controls, you could raise and lower power. You could change patterns on AM arrays. You had a little bit of feedback in that closed circuit copper system that allowed for two-way communication. And then the early Burke systems, the early Davcom systems, they started to give you a little bit more in terms of telemetry, but most of it was telephone based. Had a POTS connection to it, and you could dial in and push buttons, and it would react and tell you things. But you didn't really get that sense of having full control over the site or being able to truly monitor the physical state of the site until we started putting internet connections and broadband internet connections into transmitter sites. And now that that's just the standard, there are so many more things that we can monitor using both the existing telemetry on a lot of the web-enabled devices that you're going to find that you're purchasing already, that you're putting into those sites, plus an Internet of Things catalog of various sensors and everything from cameras to door sensors to fuel sensors on your generator. So that's and thank you again for having us or having me on today. That's kind of the topic. Just to quickly touch on what we were talking about before. The idea of redundancy, especially when it comes to automation, that was a whole topic that I was doing last year, and I'd be happy to do another guest spot on here to talk about that, because there's a lot of gaps in people's thinking and planning when it comes to redundancy in terms of automation. There's no harm in just having a machine sitting on the shelf that's ready to go, that needs to have some software put in it or some drivers updated or some system settings put in to be able to replace an automation system that just about anybody can do. Once it's online and you've got access to it remotely, you're off to the races, and you don't need to have a physical body aside from somebody to plug that machine into the internet and get it turned on.
Wow. Yeah. And you open the door to the site monitoring, and you made me think about, I used to put in a lot of sign systems, dial-up remote controls, right? Mm-hmm. John Pate, the engineer who designed or who owned sign systems, was actually a friend of mine here in Nashville, Tennessee. And unfortunately, he passed away. And but before he did, he made some really, really good products. Well, good for the time. People nowadays think, oh man, that's old and hard to use and really hard to program. But when you programmed as many as I did, you got really used to being able to program them well and learn about how to
and just having that bit of tech on site, being able to see what you're, or hear, I guess, what your transmitter is doing, what your switching network's doing, what your audio is doing, what your STL is doing. I mean, my first remote control that I ever worked with was a Monroe, just a simple Monroe dialer. It had 6 terminal connections on it, and 2 incoming relays that could tell me the state of the PA on the transmitter. Is it on or off? Is there audio present or not? Is the silence detector triggering it? Otherwise, I could turn power on, turn power off, raise power, lower power, and I think we had a couple of extra ones that were just attached to relays to reboot gear. Yeah. That in itself saved so many hours of having to drive up to the site and see what was going on and, take that time, because the transmitter sites haven't gotten any closer to where you live and work.
Bingo. You're right.
They're still in exactly the same places. And if anything, they've gotten further away because of, how congested, especially in major and medium-sized markets, of how congested things have gotten and how big the population is getting. It takes longer and longer to get to those places.
You're exactly right. But we're gonna look at what we can do now that we couldn't do then. What can you do now with remote controls, and especially the fact that we can have computers running remote control programs. So I'm eager to not only find about all the things that we can monitor and control at a remote site, I'm also eager to understand better what we can do with trend monitoring. And I think that is a huge, huge deal, trend monitoring. I do some of that myself, but it's kind of rudimentary, and I want to find out from Adam what more that we can do. Our show, This Week in Radio Tech, is brought to you in part by our friends at Broadcast Bionics. And if you're an engineer, and most of you are, you can be a hero at your broadcast facility by recommending, understanding some of the offerings from Broadcast Bionics. And one of those is something that's going to help you. At the intersection of radio engineering and IT, it's Virtual Rack. Virtual Rack is an amazing product from Broadcast Bionics. You can deploy containerized broadcast infrastructure. I mean things like audio consoles virtually, audio processors virtually, phone systems for on-the-air use virtually, even intercom systems and codecs. You can deploy all this stuff, and you can do all this without having to be a Linux expert. And I can tell you, that speaks to me. I can do Linux until something goes wrong, and then I got to spend a lot of time Googling, right? Well, Virtual Rack allows you to take advantage of the benefits of containerized, virtualized broadcast infrastructure without having to have all the skills that a Linux expert might need. What do you get with Virtual Rack? Well, you get a purpose-built appliance. Now, yes, it looks like a server because it is a server, but when you turn it on, you don't have to deal with the low-level server kind of stuff. You browse into it and you get a screen that shows you a menu. And it's the Virtual Rack management software. And in that, you get an application library. So you go pick out the applications that you want to run. And of course, some of them are from my employer, Telos Alliance, but they also have applications from Sound 4 and Ferncast and 2WCOM. So there's other companies that are involved with seeing the light in doing containerized software infrastructure that runs in servers. So you can say goodbye to complex installation. You can do it yourself just by picking an app, telling it to download and install. It does that. You tell it what IP addresses that you want it to have. You give it a few other pieces of information, and voila, you have, a console installed or an audio processor or a codec or a streaming encoder. And when you do it this way, now you still have to license the product. Okay, so let's say you download and install an audio processor from Omnia. Well, it'll work in its demo mode, whatever that may be from the manufacturer. But if you want it to actually function 100%, you buy the license from the respective manufacturer. That's not sold by Bionics. That's you do that through your normal channels, and you give it the license, and bam, you've got a working product. Then you can deploy it. You can have failover options. You can have again all these different applications that are integral to running a radio broadcast facility. We showed this to our developers at Telos Alliance, and they were truly impressed. That's not the route that Telos Alliance went. They went a more traditional route with installations in Linux. But I'll tell you what, they love this product from Broadcast Bionics because it makes it easy. You don't have to be an expert on Linux to install this stuff. And everything, of course, then is audio over IP after that. Check it out, if you will, from Broadcast Bionics. The product is called Virtual Rack. And if you go to their webpage, then you can see that there are some videos at the bottom that you can watch. And we've actually done an episode here on This Week in Radio Tech with Dan McQuillan about Virtual Rack. So check all that out. Great product. You're going to love it. And I love it. Dan, yeah, good stuff. Thank you, Broadcast Bionics, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack in Nashville at the Telos Alliance studio. My guest is Adam Robinson with MaxxKonnect. And Adam, let's see, we were going to just get right into some of the real modern benefits of site monitoring that you can do now that you couldn't do a few years ago. Let's see if we can enumerate some of those.
So let's take a look at this from the standpoint of, what I wish I had 10, 15 years ago. I had transmitter sites all over the place that were, hundreds, if not thousands of miles apart, and a very limited staff and a very limited budget. I wish I'd had the ability to, have data aggregated someplace so I could see what was going on with various components of the site, and not just transmitter forward and reflected power, not just looking at VISWR, not just looking at whether the pattern for an AM switched correctly or incorrectly, or when it switched, was it on the right schedule, etc. We're looking, what I wanted back then was more information about the physical site, because it's those physical site things that you don't necessarily think about in terms of broadcast tech, because you're focused on making sure that the station stays on the air. You're focused on making sure that transmitter is putting out full power. You're focused on making sure that the audio is getting there cleanly and effectively, and that your redundant systems for transmission and for audio are in place. But what you're not thinking about is my HVAC system as cold as it was a year ago, 2 years ago? Is it as cold as it was 6 months ago? Is it blowing the same amount of cold air? Is my generator taking longer to start? It's not just about the battery health. There could be other things at play with the generator. If it's exercising and it's taking longer to start, there's a way to monitor the cycle from the initial contact to the motor actually turning over and returning a usable signal. There's the humidity within a building. The quickest way to find out if you got a water leak? have a hygrometer somewhere in the building. And if all of a sudden
Ah,
you start seeing your humidity go from, a pretty consistent 25, 30%, maybe 35, depending on where you are, to 50, 60, 70. I'm not talking about, having a site down in the swamps of Florida, but, in other parts of the country where, you have pretty consistent humidity. If you start seeing that creep, well, why is that? Something must be
wow.
causing the amount of moisture in the site to go up. And those are just a couple of examples. I mean, there's other real world examples. I've had everything from transmitter sites burned down to people breaking into the site and shooting the place up with rifles. I've had guys who've somehow or another managed not to decapitate themselves driving around on ATVs in the middle of the night, swinging past guy wires and things.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and ice. Obviously, I'm north of the border. Ice is a big problem in Canada, and ice buildup on towers. There
Mhm.
are ways to monitor all of these things, and the technology exists today, and it's just a matter of putting all of the parts and pieces together, or you know, finding a product line or a company that is able to provide those resources. And just, if you'll forgive me, just a little tease, one of the things that we're working on at MaxxKonnect right now is a line of sensors and site monitoring that looks deeper than RF, that looks deeper than simple contact closures and simple equipment states, and actually starts looking at some of these physical plant issues. Is the door closed? Is it sealed? Is it locked? Is the gate closed? Is it locked? Are the
Mhm.
lights on the tower on consistently? Do we have visual proof that that is the case? I'll give you a quick anecdote. One of the stations that was under my purview back in the day was in a very rural part of southern Ontario, and it was a big stick, and it was on a flight path to a couple of major airports. And it had white strobes on it, silver tower white strobes. And, as far as we knew, the strobes were working. We could see, that the little, contact closure that we had off of the control system told us that, yeah, there was power to it. The lights were working, but we didn't actually know what they were doing. Well, it had been a period of time where it had been a month or more had gone by since somebody had actually physically gone to the site, because we were busy and we just didn't have the resources to have people running out to these rural sites all the time. I get a letter in the mail
Mhm.
from a guy who claims to be a neighbor of the site. And he, introduces himself. It was a 4-page letter. This guy had a lot of time on his hands, and it was handwritten too.
Yeah.
But introduced himself as a neighbor of the site, that he's been there since it was built back in the 70s or whatever, and and that there seems to be a problem with the lights on the tower because they're awfully bright. Okay, well, they're white strobes. Didn't think much of it. So as I continued to go through this letter, now he starts talking about his dog, and his poor dog, who needed to be medicated and had to be kept in a dark room because all night those lights were flashing and driving the dog nuts, and the dog would go
Oh my
crazy, and the
god.
dog would run around the house and yelp and bark and howl. And so I thought to myself, that's not right. Even if the guy lives next door to the site, that's not right.
Mhm.
What's going on? Is it stuck in day mode? Maybe it's stuck in day mode. So on one foggy October evening, I drive out to this site, and I got within a mile of it. Every 3 seconds, it looked like a flash of lightning across the sky.
Mm.
And
Mm.
both the sinking feeling of embarrassment, but
Uh-huh.
also that notion of, man, we probably should have got to this sooner. It had been like that for over a month. There'd been a
Oh,
lightning strike
wow.
at some point. It had knocked out the control board, and those strobes got stuck in day mode. And this guy finally, wrote a letter because of his poor dog.
Yeah.
Not about him or his wife or anybody else in the neighborhood who might be, suffering some level of insomnia from having those lights flashing in their windows all night, but the dog. I never did follow up with the guy to find out, what the fate of the dog was after we fixed the strobes. But that's an example, and the reason I tell that story, not because it's just a great funny story, but it's an example of how even 15 years ago, we were already starting to enter into this period of time where there just weren't enough physical resources and human resources to be able to monitor these sites effectively. This is a cluster of radio stations that the company I worked for took over, and they had 2 full-time engineers. And when our company took over their company, one of them retired and the other one decided that they didn't want to work for the new owners. So we ended up with no technical support in that community that it had previously had 2 full-time engineers for 80 some odd years. So, it left me wishing that at that time we'd had the ability to better monitor the site. And that day, I believe, is now. I think we're at that point where those devices are available. And again, to not to harp on this one particular group of stations, but the general manager called me about 6 months after we'd taken over operations of the facility. And he said, Adam, he goes, I don't know what to do. We're beside ourselves down here. Every time there's a thunderstorm, stations go off the air, both of them. I said, okay. We're working on trying to shore up the stability and harden the sites a little bit, if you will. One of them had terrible power. And the other one was just on top of a tall mountain and got hit by lightning all the time. That was the FM with the strobes. Yeah. He says, well, there's got to be something we can do about it because this is unacceptable. We've never had these problems before. And now I've got, lifelong listeners calling and asking, what's gone on with the new owners and do they not care and do they not spend any money? I said, whoa, hang on. Where were the 2 engineers that used to work there every time there was inclement weather? At the sites? I said, okay, so you were paying 2 guys full-time salaries and they didn't actually make the sites better. They didn't make them work better. And they sure as heck didn't put in any, new monitoring or anything. They just drove to the site. So, oh, look, there's storm clouds. Well, I'm going to AM, you go to FM. Okay. They spend their entire day sitting there waiting for something to happen so they can put it back on the air. Yeah. So, that experience connected with, the changing views in the industry towards technical staff and the difficulty in finding people to work at rural stations, led me into the idea of better site monitoring. And here we are today. Again, as I said, we now have the ability to start looking at some of this stuff. We just need to start applying it and start using it.
I'm really interested, and maybe we can get into it as the show progresses, but you can monitor different things. And you mentioned a little while ago humidity and have a remote sensing hygrometer there. And they make those for server rooms and all kinds of things. You can get those. And if you get a number back from that, let's say you install one and you say, oh, the humidity there is 61%. Well, that doesn't mean a lot unless you know what it was yesterday or the day before or 3 weeks ago or a year ago. And so that's where we get trend monitoring. And with trend monitoring, there's so many things we can glean from trend monitoring. And I know this isn't a transmitter site, but I want to show you one. This is at my house, and I've got solar panels on the roof. And this is a year worth of solar production at my house. And of course, you can see it peaks in June, July. Peaked in July. And then August went down. We had some more thunderstorms. September was down. But and that's kind of interesting to know. But then look at this. This is my use of grid power. And in March, I used almost no grid power. Because I had March jumped up over here. March jumped up.
You must have had a record number of days of sunshine for
we
March.
Had a lot of sunshine last March and mild temperatures. The air conditioner, did not come on. And so we used very little electricity. And so anyway, looking at trends like that can really tell you a lot. I've shown it before. I'm not going to show it now, but I monitor 15 different radio associated sites, some transmitter sites and some studio sites. I monitor 15 different sites with just a simple ping on the internet, and using a program called multi-ping, it graphs the ping response time over time. And so I can see, hey, the internet was out for 10 minutes at this site, or we missed a lot of pings yesterday between 7 and 10 p.m. Netflix hours, at this site. And just knowing the ping time doesn't tell you much. It tells you if it's working or not working, maybe. But if you graph that over time, you can tell a lot about the health of a given internet connection, and it's really been helpful. So to me, trend monitoring is every bit is like, if you have the data, then you can graph it over time and you can see trends for yourself. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where this whole idea needs to go. We've always done trend graphing of RF. We've always done trends in in watching the impedance of an AM array change throughout the year, right? We watch the ground drift depending on how wet, cold, frozen, dry it might be. And we record all of that information, but we don't ever record the internal temperature of the building, and we don't record the humidity, and we don't record power consumption, and we don't record how often the generator comes on, and we don't record all of these things that could potentially lead us to solving problems before they happen. So I'd mentioned the story of the two full-time engineers who were no more, and now the stations are off the air every time there's a spit of rain. That is become the norm. It's become so common in the industry that there either aren't people to go out and manage these sites or physically monitor these sites, or they're spread so thin that some of these sites may get a visit once a year. I mean, sure, there's remote places all across the country, all across North America, where, it's really hard to get to the site. I had a site that I couldn't get to for 4 or 5 months of the year because it was inaccessible due to snow and ice.
Oh, wow.
But, those places were, there was an acceptable amount of downtime. There's nothing I can do about it. It's off the air without somebody risking their life to go put it back on. We'll just have to go to the standby and wait for the primary site to either come back online or its own, or for somebody to be able to get up there. But this is becoming more and more a trend in the industry where there just isn't enough resources, not enough human resources in order to be able to get out and monitor these sites. So if we can start graphing these trends, then we can see these problems before they become problems. We can set alerts and alarms. AI, you mentioned ChatGPT a while back, and I'll tell you, there are a lot of people. There's a lot of talk. There's a lot of differing opinions about AI and whether or not we can trust it, and whether or not we should use it, and whether or not it's going to replace all the human beings. Okay, robots were going to replace all the human beings. Driverless cars were going to replace all the human beings. The horseless carriage was going to replace human. I mean, we could go back through history of all of the times that something was going to replace human beings. It's a tool. And if you use it the right way, and you use it effectively, and you learn from it, and it learns from you, you can do all kinds of things with AI, and you should embrace it. Look at what kids are doing. I have teenage kids, and they don't use Google anymore. It's all chat. If they need an answer to something, it's chat. They don't even ask Alexa anymore. It's just go to ChatGPT and get the answers that they need, because it does. It digs through all of the things that are all the data that's available out there, and return something that's more of an overview as opposed to, here's some search results, now you got to do the work yourself. How can we use AI to increase our ability to predict issues as they occur at sites? And it doesn't just have to be transmitter sites. It could be any site. It could be your studio plant. It could be you could be monitoring a few things at a relay station. You could be monitoring a few things at your morning person's, home studio. The possibilities are virtually endless as to what we can monitor. And then once we collect that data and we bring it all back together in one place, then, like you say, we can graph it. We can start looking at trends, and we can see that, over the span of a year, battery on that generator gets pretty dead, even though it's being charged. Maybe we should replace the battery. The air conditioner was putting out, cold air at 60 degrees, for the first 3 months of the year. And then all of a sudden it went up to 65 degrees. The airflow, you can even monitor the airflow. Transmitters have had airflow monitors in them since forever. But we can monitor the airflow that's coming out of an exhaust fan or coming out of an HVAC system to see if that's functioning properly. And it's just, there are so many pieces of data that we can collect that are just not being, I don't want to say they're being ignored, but they're being overlooked because we're so, as an industry, we are so in tune with the idea of we are here to monitor the RF. That's what we need to pay attention to. And whether or not the generator starts and exercises, and whether or not the pattern changes, and whether or not the audio is there. Those things are all, second nature. We need to start looking at the physical plant itself, because it could be a year. It could be a year before a human being steps foot in that site. It could be a year before somebody who actually knows what they're doing goes and visits one of those remote sites and then goes, oh, wow. I've got a big black scorch mark on the wall where a contactor used to be. Gee, I wish I'd known that had happened. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, it doesn't necessarily, I guess that's why the generator won't turn on. But it doesn't necessarily have to be, it doesn't have to be complex. It can be simple things. And a lot of people are putting web-based cameras into their sites. Everybody has cameras and monitoring now. You can even, at the consumer level, again, do temperature and humidity and, airflow. You can do all of that sort of stuff. But there are, as I punch my computer and make my camera jiggle. Hi, I'm not a TV guy. I talk with my hands. I don't have a problem talking with my hands on radio. Anyway, but I mean, you can start building some of that yourself, or you can turn to a company that's going to be dedicated and devoted to actually finding that data for you and providing a service. And that service is, hey, we noticed a trend. Hey, we've looked at the data and we think that this is a problem. You might want to go check on it.
Great point. And as I pointed out, my desire to see trends, at most of our transmitter sites, we've taken a cheap way out that works for now, but it doesn't really help us in the long run. So here's one of our transmitter sites, and I know you can't see that all that well. A camera won't adjust that, but there's a big honking thermometer there. It's a $10 thermometer from the Walmart up the street. And we have a camera that, always shows it. And even though you couldn't see it on the show here, I can tell you that it is about 66 degrees in that transmitter building right now. And that's fine. But what was it at 2 a.m.? What was it yesterday? What was it during the cold snap that we just had? What was it in the middle of August or July? Was the air conditioner keeping up? And that, I don't know, because I don't check it every day. I don't write it down. But knowing,
well, and you're not graphing the trends then, are you?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So let me ask you this, because I'm as lazy as anybody else. My doctor wants me to monitor my blood pressure and write it down at the same time every day. I got a watch that does that now, and my blood pressure monitor keeps a pretty long log of the time, the date, the time, and the blood pressure. So I just bring that in here. Yeah, let's look through this. Anything surprising to you? Are we doing okay? So, of course, the doctor always, pat himself on the back. Well, it looks like the prescriptions I have for you are doing their job.
You've got one of those doctors. Mine likes to play on my, on my guilt and my shame. That doesn't look good. Did you eat a lot of red meat last week?
Okay. So, we probably have time to start your answer for this question. We may have to save part of it for after the next commercial break. We've talked about a number of different sensors, anything from, I'm not sure if you mentioned in this show yet, but in our pre-show we did about, monitoring the security gate at the end of the driveway out by the road, or monitoring all these things to do with the generator, or to do with the air conditioning, or the transmitters, the lights, the humidity, temperature, all these kinds of things. And what I'm wondering is, what are the different technologies that we have to use to interface to all these things? Some of them are just dry contact closures. Others are some kind of sensor that's got to be brought in and turned into a voltage and then sampled and turned into a reading. Some of it may be an SNMP interface where we talk to a transmitter or a piece of equipment using, we what's the word for it? We interrogate that piece of equipment and we see what comes back. So it seems to me like, okay, now we have this little problem, this challenge where we have all these different types of data coming in, some as simple as just a contact closure, others a swinging voltage. How do we aggregate those things together into a meaningful display? And some of the stuff maybe home technologies like Zigbee. Are there technologies that kind of can help make this cohesive? How would you start to answer that question?
Well, the first thing I'm going to say is that, there are standards. You mentioned SNMP. There's certain IP standards where, where data is delivered in a stream and needs to be decoded, in a certain language. But there are already existing platforms out there that can take in that information. The issue is that they're not designed for broadcast and they are prohibitively expensive, which I think is one of the reasons why nobody's gone kind of wide scale with this yet. At MaxxKonnect, we're working on a proof of concept and have been for almost 2 years now, with a specific line of sensors that speak a specific language, that talk to a specific controller that will give us the ability to be able to provide that as a service. But for those of you who are enterprising and want to do it on your own, there's all kinds of different technologies out there. There's there's a Microsoft product called Power BI. My wife works in the manufacturing field, and she actually has a full-time team of engineers who have designed a monitoring system using Power BI that pulls in information from all kinds of different things, from everything from dry contact closures to SNMP to to other proprietary technologies. As long as it can put out a stream, you can build something on the other end that can read it. So there are ways of going about doing it, but none of it is again geared towards broadcast, and none of it's particularly elegant or complete. So the answer is yes. There are many consumer-based models out there that will work, but at the same time, you're not going to find a lot of cohesion among those things. So I guess the answer to the question is you need to pick and choose. You need to be a little diligent about it, I suppose, in terms of finding the right technology that all talks to a control system.
Okay, all right. And I would guess that you're my guest on the show today. You work with the folks at MaxxKonnect, Triple Helix, and I'm going to guess that on down the road, you guys might have some solutions where you provide the interfacing. Is that on the roadmap?
Yeah, that's what we're working on right now. Obviously, one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation with you was twofold, because it is something that is not. It's in the conversation all the time, and any show I go to, any conference I go to, there's papers all the time about Jeff Welton from Nautel does a great one about site hardening. There's everybody's talking about it, but is anybody actually doing anything about it? And so that is sort of the second half of the equation for us at MaxxKonnect and Triple Helix right now, is that we are actually doing something about it. And without turning this into a sales pitch, let's just say that we anticipate that by NAB, we should have a solution, not only for the monitoring, but also for the aggregation of data and a service that can be provided to help people out with keeping an eye on the sites and the plants. Because again, everybody can manipulate their transmitters, everybody can manipulate their audio feeds, everybody can read that data. We're looking more at the physical health of the plant. And I gave you the example of the strobe lights that had been in day mode for a month and drove that poor guy's dog nuts. But I've had so many disasters that probably could have been averted, and not catastrophic disasters, like sure, fires, ice storms, windstorms, hurricanes, things that you can't control, but significant downtime, significant off-air time, and revenue lost because we weren't able to keep an eye on the fact that the vent louvers in the generator room aren't closing after the generator exercises. So now the generator's frozen and won't start.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah.
Or the other side of the other side of that equation is perhaps it's a generator that's not getting enough cooling and it overheats and again won't start. These are things that can be easily monitored, and the information can be used, and again, using AI technology, the information can be used to predict issues before they happen.
I want to put a camera inside my generator housing and have AI tell me what kind of animal has built a house in there.
Well, that might be going just a hair too far. But boy, if I'd known how much snakes like tuning coils,
yeah, snakes do.
I'd be able to put some plexiglass around them.
Automatically send the picture from the Wise camera to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT. It looks like you have a honey badger.
It looks like you have some killer bees that have decided to take
killer bees. There you go. That's right. Hey, we are talking to Adam Robinson. He's with MaxxKonnect, and he's an engineer and a radio guy, and kind of master of a number of things. And his resume, his bio says so. And we're talking about site monitoring, and what are some of the things that we are getting able to do now, and how it's getting more convenient. Very important. And in just a minute, Adam's gonna do the commercial for MaxxKonnect. So hang on, we're gonna tell you about Angry Audio first, and then we'll get to MaxxKonnect. Our show is brought to you in part by Angry Audio. My friend Mike Catfish Dosh just down the road, and I'm gonna. They say that from your drug dealer, the first hit is always free, right? Well, this isn't free, but it gets you in the door, and that is the headphone disconnector. The headphone disconnector is this brilliant device. Why nobody made one before, I have no idea. But the headphone disconnector from Angry Audio is a little accessory that needs to be in all your studios. What is it? Well, the headphone disconnector lets you put this device, these little cables, before your jock plugs the headphones into the headphone amp under the table or wherever it is. You put the headphone disconnector in its place, and the headphone disconnector is magnetically, kind of like a MagSafe connector on a Mac computer. The headphone disconnector will disconnect if you pull on it. It won't break off the 1/4 inch or the 1/8 inch jack plug into the jack. And, I've had to replace those before in a studio where I didn't have a headphone disconnector. Just had to do that about a year ago in Greenville, Mississippi. I'm wondering, why can't I plug my headphones in? Oh, there's something in there. So you took the headphone amplifier apart, opened it up, and sure enough, there's the 1/4 inch part of a 1/4 inch headphone in there. Had to pry that out, get it out, and now it works. Now we got headphone disconnectors, and they are just what a clever bit of kit, as some people would say. Well, the headphone disconnector also is available in a panel mount version, so that instead of having this extra dongle there, you can just plug half of the headphone disconnector into it. You can also change sizes. If you've got headphones that have an 1/8 inch, but your headphone amp has a 1/4 inch, you can mix and match the sizes of the headphone connectors on it. So it's really cool. But what I was saying about it gets you in the door, once you try the headphone disconnector, you're going to want to try other things from Angry Audio if you haven't already. Things like the guest gizmo and the headphone gizmo, things like the mic drop. Lots of accessories that work absolutely fantastically from Angry Audio. So check them out. Thanks so much, Mike Dosh and Angry Audio, for coming up with these accessories that make studios look good. They're easy to install. And they work well. Love these things. I've got them in all my studios. Every one of my studios, I've got some Angry Audio accessories. All right. If you want to check them out on the web, they're at angryaudio.com. Now, Adam, you want to tell us about what's happening at MaxxKonnect. What would you like to talk about for a minute?
Well, sure. Thanks, Kirk, and props to Catfish. Some of those gizmos that he's come up with are absolute, incredible problem solvers. You talk about having his gear in your studios. I certainly had it in mine, and I think everybody does. So kudos to him. As far as where we're at with MaxxKonnect right now, our wireless offerings are still available and as cost effective as always for prioritized access to the wireless network, for remotes, for transmitter sites, for remote locations where you need to have that prioritized access that isn't throttled. That's the big key to it. We have access to a piece of the bandwidth with the big three. That means that even in high traffic areas, the example I always give is, you're in a football stadium and there's 50,000 people on their phone trying to live tweet or, TikTok or whatever. You're not going to lose your connection because it's prioritized access to the network. Your bandwidth will stay there and your connection will stay steady. So you can actually do your remote. Static IPs as well. Very important, especially if you're trying to do site monitoring. So you don't have to, remap every time there's an IP change if you've got VPN connected between the two sites. We are currently in the process of looking at higher bandwidth solutions and getting into the 5G arena. So stay tuned for more information about that. For those of you out there who have been asking about potentially doing video remotes, we are going to have solutions in place for that, as well as our satellite internet service. Again, higher bandwidth with fewer caps, and the same great service you come to expect from MaxxKonnect. We have satellite available for fixed locations. On the broadcast side, we're doing really well with the RMT 416 multi-tuner. Fantastic piece of gear. Kirk, we were talking about the importance of graphing data. The graphing data that you can get out of an RMT 416 tuner will show you, if you have dips in RF, it'll show you where your pattern changes. It'll show you where you go from day mode to night mode. And it's a good frontline way of knowing that there's a problem where your signal's off the air or it's gone silent. It'll tell you that through SNMP. It'll also tell you that through email alerting. And I guess the most recent addition to the family is a very simple 950 band STL. It's a 950 band analog STL, but it's web enabled in the back end and also has monitoring and also has email alerting. So we're trying to continue to make connections by enabling the equipment that we build and manufacture to be connected all the time, to have that monitoring data available so that we can connect it into this monitoring service that we're working towards launching in the new year.
Cool. Good deal. MaxxKonnect. You can find them on the web at MaxxKonnect.com. It's spelled funny, isn't it, Adam?
It is. There's lots of X's and K's in there, but it makes us unique. MaxxKonnect.com.
We'll always have a link in the show notes in case you can't remember that, or you can probably
you can probably put that up. You got the magic of TV. You can put that up along the bottom of the screen, can't you? We'll fix it.
Yeah, but then it's still ephemeral, so we put it in the show notes and it's there forever. You can go to any of our shows and there's a link for MaxxKonnect for as long as they've been a sponsor. How about that?
It's I'll tell you, I wouldn't be here were it not for the MaxxKonnect management team, and especially Josh, the owner and the president of the company. He is a brilliant mind, and a lot of the stuff that comes out of our shop is directly related to him. So, if you got a problem that needs solving, go ahead and give us a call, because Josh will probably already have a solution plan for it. He just hasn't executed it.
Ladies and gentlemen, Adam Robinson for MaxxKonnect. Check it out at MaxxKonnect.com. Hey,
I'm done with the shameless plug now.
Our time is slipping away. We literally only have about 8 minutes left in the whole show. And there's a couple things that I want to get to. We got one more commercial break toward the end and a tip of the week from Adam Robinson. He just found out about that. Okay, so the transmitter site.
I'm pretty good on my feet. Years and years and years of being on the air and having to fill time. I'm pretty good. I'm pretty quick on my feet.
Now the transmitter sites are so connected, it opens up a security risk. And I'm glad you mentioned this, because Adam, I've got some transmitter sites that get their internet via IP radio link from the studio.
Mhm.
And right now, if you were to bust into maybe one or two of my transmitter sites and you hosed into the Ethernet switch, you would have access to our stuff back at the studio. And I got to fix that. I got to turn off those ports or put them on a different VLAN so you don't have access. I need to, do what I can to limit. If you broke in the transmitter site and hosed a computer into the network, you'd have access to some stuff. That's got to change.
It's becoming more and more apparent that if somebody can break into a system, especially a commonly used system like those 2.45 gigahertz radios that people are using for for creating those internal, not really internal, I mean internal external links, yeah, they can be hacked. There's absolutely no getting around that. However, with a secure private hybrid public connection, you can essentially air gap those sites if you want to, and that is something that needs to be taken into consideration when you're designing your security protocol. The sensor product that we've been talking about in the line of sensors that we have available are they're a closed circuit Wi-Fi, so they're not wired; they're closed circuit. Which means that they can't be hacked externally. Somebody can't walk by and go, "Oh, I'm just going to find the address of that device and type it in, and now I have control of your door sensor, or now I have access to your network that way." So security from that standpoint is already paramount to the design of these systems. But you can do it yourself simply by look, the convenience of being able to throw up one of those Ubiquity radios and send your internet from studio to transmitter is great. But again, they're subject to interference, and somebody can just as easily break into that as they could break into a satellite uplink. So air gaps, keep public internet services in mind. It's not a bad word anymore, and the service is becoming far and far more robust, especially in remote areas, that you can access them. VPNs, encrypted technology, SSL certification on everything on either end of a link, and in some cases, if you're really that concerned about your security, don't keep the link up all the time. Access it when you need to, and then shut it down the rest of the time. There are ways about, of going about doing that. You don't need, a gig of bandwidth between transmitter and studio unless you're transporting audio and video across that link. So, you could be able to get away with just a simple 1 gig LTE system that, could do the site monitoring without having to have this big pipe and this big open hole in your firewall.
Something that we've talked about with regard to the MaxxKonnect wireless service, and we've shown some graphics on it, is failover. A lot of transmitter sites now have one path, and maybe that one path, that one IP path, is taking your program audio to the transmitter site and providing you with cameras coming back and remote control of your transmitters. What can I do to have more than one path available?
Well, again, different services on different platforms, right? It's the same as back in the old days when we had a copper pair delivering program audio with an STL backup or vice versa. So if your primary internet connection is fiber or DSL, God forbid, you can use that for everything with a redundant layer built in that at least takes care of the basics. Via LTE, maybe satellite. There are so many different ways to be able to get a signal into a site these days. It doesn't necessarily have to be, just conventional wired internet. So that's one way of going about doing it. So through diversity of service, but also, put a local backup in. You mentioned Air and Playout One earlier, and many of the automation systems out there will give you the ability to put a hot standby at your transmitter site. So, God, if the link from studio to transmitter is cut to a point that there's somebody's physically going to have to go fix that, and the standby hasn't accomplished the task either, you can have a hot standby automation system for very little money sitting right there at the transmitter site ready to inject into the transmitter. Yeah,
Funny you
you
should.
kind of. I mean, it's the Johnny Fever and Venus Flytrap going out to the transmitter site. When the bomb called they used to have studios at transmitters. The transmitter used to be connected to the studio building. Why aren't we doing that stuff anymore? And it's because people aren't thinking about that full level of catastrophic failure, redundancy, and quite frankly, how relatively inexpensive it is to make sure that you're covered.
So I've got several radio stations now where the radio station infrastructure, that is the playout systems and the ingest systems for ingesting various programs, everything is at the transmitter site. And we just remote control it. In fact, we got one station where the morning show from the studio is literally a 4.5 hour remote broadcast every day. And it looks like a studio. We've got remote control into an Axia Altus, so we got faders on the screen, big 24-inch touchscreens, 24-inch touchscreen for the remote control for the automation system, and we do have a local mixer there too. It happens to be a virtual mixer, but we mix the mics together and blah blah blah. And that's an interesting way to do it, and it may raise some new problems or questions, but it sure eliminates a lot of others. We can be without internet, and we can't do a live morning show, but we're still on the air.
Yeah, and that's again, this is again, we've kind of veered off of the topic we came here to talk about, and again, this
that's right, we did, didn't we?
What I was doing previously. But I mean, automation companies are cognizant of the fact that there needs to be multiple layers of backup and multiple streams of backup, and they're starting to put it in. And I'll give you one last example before we go about the how critical it is to make sure that you've got certain parts of your network air gapped, or that everything isn't just open to everything inside. A couple of very good friends of mine a few years ago ended up with a ransomware attack. And before they even knew what had happened, it had spread to every corner of the organization. They were locked out of automation. They were locked out of their AOIP control system. They were locked out of their transmitter sites. They were locked out of absolutely anything that was connected, because it was all just on a, what they thought was an open and secure VPN. But sometimes that level of control, that level of networking among all of your sites can sometimes be a detriment, especially in a situation like that. So, if there's any piece of advice I'll give you on that front, is simply just air gap the things that need to be air gapped. And there's nothing wrong with taking a physical backup of things anymore, and actually sticking a hard drive into a server and taking a physical copy of it, pulling the USB cable out when you're done. You just have to remember to do it, obviously. But that's the disaster recovery, and again, watching trends. I mean, you can even trend out how many attacks you have on your firewall. You can trend out that stuff and see if they're increasing, if they're coming from the same IP, different IPs, or who is attacking you. All of this information is available, and all you need to do is just find some way to aggregate it.
Well, we were getting attacked, turned out, from the station across town. So you know what we did? We hired their IT guy away from them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hey, if that's what it takes, I mean, you'll hire the morning guy. Why not hire their IT guy?
That's right. That's right. Hey, we're going to be back in just a minute with a final tip from Adam Robinson in just a minute. Our show is brought to you in part by our friends at Innovonics. Innovonics makes the Sophia HD site streamer. This is the HD radio site streamer. I love this thing. We have one of these in Hawaii, we got one in Oxford, Mississippi too. And this lets me monitor not only the audio from our FM, from our HD1, HD2, and HD3. It also shows me the RDS, or in the US, the RBDS data. Shows me the quality of that data. It shows me the injection level of the RDS signal, and it shows me the PSD. We used to call it PAD, but the program, what does it stand for? PSD, program something or other data. And this box from Innovonics is just absolutely fantastic. You can program it all from the front panel, but it also has a web interface. So you can look at it, program it from the web interface. You can also listen remotely, which is what I need to do sometimes for our stations in Mississippi and in Hawaii. You can install it within the reception contour, of course, of your station, and monitor your off-air signals. Sometimes it's hard to get the local people in the market to tell you, well, is the transmitter off or is it just dead air? Well, I don't know. Well, you can figure this out for yourself, Mr. Engineer, because it's easy to do. It has a built-in band scanner display that displays a spectrum plot of the whole FM band, or just part of it if you're interested in, and it identifies for you HD radio transmissions. It has an easy front panel setup, uses a jog wheel menu for navigation, and front panel readout. It's bright, easy to read. Plus, there's, like I said, a web interface that gives you a detailed presentation and more options. It stays on channel and on mode through signal and power loss. Boy, is that important. So your power goes off at the station. When it comes back on, it's just like you left it. You don't have to go, redo anything. It has front panel alarms available, and you can also turn these into SNMP or contact closures. It also has a split mode for monitoring your audio between your FM and your HD1. And that's really helpful for getting those two things in line with each other. I certainly used that at our station, one of our stations in Hawaii that's doing HD. So check it out. This is a really brilliant piece of technology. It's the Sophia HD Radio Site Streamer, also known as the Model 568 from Innovonics. And where do you get it? Well, the same place you get all the stuff that you need for your broadcast facility, and that's Broadcasters General Store. The website is bgs.cc. bgs.cc. Man, their website has gotten better and better over the years. The quick search, and it's got prices on there, and they really take care of you. They really do. Good people at Broadcasters General Store. Check them out. All right. Thanks a lot, BGS, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. All right. We got like 30 seconds. Adam, you got a tip of the week for us?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you a quick little tagline here. The biggest failures we see aren't catastrophic blowups; they're slow burns.
Oh,
okay. So we've been talking about monitoring. We've been talking about trends. We've been talking about data. Believe the data. Pay attention to the data. It's there. It's available to you. Record it. It could be something, your VSWR could be creeping. Your HVAC could be blowing warmer air. Your IP could become unstable and become jittery. Batteries get old. STLs get noisy. Your generator takes too long to start. I keep falling back on that one because that one happened a lot when I was in that position. So
yeah.
it's sometimes it's the bigger issue is what you don't see as opposed to what you do see. And if you put a proper monitoring system in place and you pay attention to that data, then you're going to be ahead of the game.
Adam Robinson with MaxxKonnect. I'm sorry, sir. We are out of time. We got to go. So thanks a lot for being with us. And we'll see you at the next convention, and I'll be in touch with some link information about the show when it gets published tomorrow. All righty.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kirk. Thanks for having me.
Take care. Thanks. That's Adam Robinson of MaxxKonnect and Triple Helix Technologies. We got to go. Big thanks to Suncast for producing today's show. I'm Kirk Harnack. We'll see you next week. We got a great show next week about FM antenna improvements. It's all coming up next week on This Week in Radio Tech.